Hi, this is Pat Moorhead with Moor Insights Strategy, and we are here for another incredible, action-packed, fun-filled 6-5 podcast. It's Friday. I'm with Daniel Newman. There's nobody else I'd rather be with. Just ask my family. Here we are.
Hey, morning, Pat. I love it. You're feeling the spunk on a Friday morning. This is my favorite time of the week. It is coming to the end of the year, and the pods may not be coming as fast and furious over the next couple of weeks as we take some downtime. But God, what a year! Episode 149. Can you believe it?
I can't believe it, and we should consider doing an end-of-year roundup. We should see if we can dig up some bloopers. Everybody loves bloopers. If this is your first time to the 6-5, we cover 6 topics, 5 minutes each, all the time more. We do a little bit of news just to get the context. We're all about the tech analysis, and we do talk some earnings, and don't take anything that we say about earnings as investment advice. Seek an expert. We have a great show for you today. I mean, it has been fast and furious. I think we had to cut out 4 or 5 topics that we wanted to. The 10-5 is not in our future plans, but every once in a while we do talk about that many. Hey, we're talking about Lattice Avant announcement, MongoDB Earnings, Marvell Industry Analyst event, FTC file suit to block Microsoft, ouch, Activision deal, Broadcom earnings, and another senior executive, Slack founder and CEO Stuart Butterfield is leaving Salesforce. What are the implications? What's going on over there? Hey, I'm going to dive in and call my own number on Lattice Avant. Dana, you and I were there.
I love it.
You and I were there live in our analyst capacity. And of course, we flew in early to do our 6-5 thing, did multiple videos. We met with senior management. A little backstory, the company is on an absolute run. CEO Jim Anderson has 10x the stock since his arrival, and I think that's pretty awesome. They announced their 40th anniversary. Who would have thunk? Wow. The company is all about low power, all about performance, small form factor, and even 40 years later, they are sticking to their guns. But highlight of this was the announcement of Avant, and that is an FPGA that doubles the market size that the company can go back for. And maybe they're being a little bit conservative about that doubling, but that's what I love about Jim Anderson and his team. They're conservative and they hit their numbers. So Avant, 30x more performance. They did competitive dive bombs on AMD Xilinx, Intel Altera, 2.5x on power, 2x higher bandwidth, and 6x smaller. And you know what, Dan? When it comes to semiconductors, performance, power, and area is pretty much everything. But we are a little bit more mature as a semiconductor industry now, and it's about 50+% software. And that's where the company has done a fine job with its SDKs going across AI, going across vision, going against cyber resiliency. They have an automation stack and they have an ORAN stack to make it easier for customers to go in and implement their technology, because bag of parts just doesn't work anymore. Fine job by the team. Great dinner afterwards. Pretty incredible.
Yeah, Pat, absolutely. Marvell. We'll talk about them later. But we came in for the big Lattice Avant launch. You and I have been working closely as advisors to the company, giving feedback along the way. The company's kind of specialized itself at the low end of the market, but there is kind of this white space, with Altera and Xilinx really focusing in the premium tier. There is this mid-market and this need for these agile, flexible FPGA offerings that can meet both power in terms of lower power and at the same time delivering performance. The company really focused on those three things. One, the power and being able to deliver lower power. And they showed some really wonderful demos. And Pat, we've got a great 6.5 video that everybody can check out that digs into this a little bit more. They also focused on the fact that while being lower power, it is delivering that higher performance. And then, of course, there's so many AI at the edge applications that are going to be usable. They showed some really interesting utilization potential in the automotive space and object detection. These are all going to be areas that are going to be growing and scaling. And the best thing, Pat, about what they're doing is that 90% of their current customers are the potential customers for the Avant line. So, a lot of times when a company kind of diversifies its portfolio, people say, oh, no, are they going to be able to break in? Well, in this particular business, the break in is 90% of the battle. So they're already in front of these customers. There's already an interest in working with Lattice. Lattice has been able to show resiliency, growth, and demand throughout this pandemic. And even kind of during this period where semis have been a little out of vogue, Lattice has been able to continue to show growth. There's a little bit of a theme of that. We'll talk about that actually today when we talk about MongoDB as well. But other companies that are they're market takers. They're creating markets, but they're really taking market in an area where they're not getting a lot of competition, Pat. And you and I both said this. I think we both even tweeted it. Very interesting to see how incumbents like Intel and AMD react as Lattice comes up market and starts playing a little bit more in their sandbox. So if they react, it's a legitimizer for what Lattice is doing. And if they don't react, is it free market to be had? And I'm not saying it is, but I'm also not saying it isn't. We had the chance also to get on stage with the CEO, Jim Anderson, and a few of his senior executives, and we talked to them further. Another 6.5 pod. Pat, am I calling our number enough here? Another 6.5 pod that you have to check out. It's a nice deep dive, both from a technical, from an investor, and from a customer experience lens. That you can better understand what the company's doing and why we tend to believe they're in a really good position long-term with this investment. So I'll leave it there. A lot more to come, Pat, but good stuff from Lattice.
Yeah, let's move on to MongoDB and earnings. Absolutely an incredible run here. Dan, why don't you keep the love coming?
All right, buddy. We love to give you the ground truth, and earnings are always that ground truth moment. I learned that from you, Pat. I call it the ground truth now. When people ask, why do you always talk about earnings? I always say, well, it's the actual moment to see if everything these companies are telling us is actually true. Like, people want their products and are using them. Right. Mongo, a little different than some of the transactional databases and the insights that we think about, is really all about the developer. So this is the company that's built the developer data platform, and it's if you think about apps that you use on your mobile device, for transportation or for streaming or for content, Mongo is the database that a lot of these companies are using to build upon. This company now has over 39,000 customers in 100 countries. And their platform has been downloaded over 325 million times. Just a few stats, because Mongo's not a company we talk about as frequently as some of these other. Great news this quarter. So while a lot of SaaS and software companies have been getting routed this quarter, Mongo had a wonderful performance. Ended up driving double-digit after-hour market reaction because they beat. They actually showed a profit while everyone was expecting a loss, which, by the way, makes the street very happy in this current market. They delivered, 10% above on what was expected for their revenue, which was a 47% growth on a year-over-year basis. This also means, the adoption and the spend and the platform is going. And then finally, they actually pushed up margins, Pat. They pushed margins up, which means, they're able to drive higher pricing, or they have price elasticity, and they're able to keep their costs under control. Really important during this current market, condition that we're dealing with. And finally, Pat, and I just want to say 63% of their Q3 revenue came from the cloud. And this is a really big thing, as we're seeing the ability for companies to build apps on a cloud-based data platform like MongoDB. This is going to be a big driver of margin, big driver of recurring revenue, and it's a big driver of growth for the company long term because it's sticky. And as the apps grow, the use grows, the spend grows, and the Mongo, it benefits from that consumption model. Atlas revenue, their cloud offering of the MongoDB platform, is 61% up year over year. So, the company's been very actively working with AWS so that companies that are building in AWS can burn credits through the AWS platform. They work with Azure, and they're seeing their customers that are spending money grow. Finally, Pat, they actually pushed up guidance, which again, a beat on a front and a raise is pretty much the exception, not the rule during this current market condition and that we're dealing with. You got to feel good about that. Good quarter for MongoDB.
Yeah, and a beat and a raise when you beat by 236% on EPS and nearly a 10% beat on revenue. Truly outstanding. And I see this as an inflection point for the company in that it was one thing to do certain, I would say, non-strategic things in the public cloud. But I think what we're seeing with Atlas, and then you look at MongoDB's sweet spot, which is an operational database, as opposed to, let's say, a less strategic database. This means that companies are moving the most important things to the public cloud, and they're using MongoDB as a vehicle to do that. I think the other cool thing is I think MongoDB has a lot of room to grow. So first off, where's the Azure? Where's the Google Cloud? Where is the true hybrid capability? They do have on-prem capability, but I wouldn't necessarily call it hybrid because it's not a sinew that you can, let's say, run the same databases in two places. You can do backup and stuff like that, but it's not by definition hybrid. It's very much a multi-cloud type of opportunity here. So an outstanding showing, particularly in this economy. I think it's a milestone that we need to be looking at, that more strategic workloads are moving to the public cloud.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about it, Pat, and I think that the pivot, these successful pivots, not to boomerang, we can keep moving, but the successful pivots you see with companies like this, Splunk had a similar result this quarter where they turned the tide after kind of moving to these consumption and cloud models. These are good inflection points. We always like to point out the bad ones, so it's also worthwhile to note when something good like this is happening.
Yeah, so let's move to the next topic here, the Marvell Industry Analyst event. Boop.
Oh,
all good. I got it. I got us, buddy.
Gosh, I'm so bad at that.
Yeah. So this was, let me just say it, the best industry analyst only event that I've been to this year, and it's kind of like the Academy Awards for the 12 people who still watch that, where they get some of the best movies at the very end. And I mean, it's what makes a good industry analyst event. Well, it's one day. You get access to the most senior executives, including the CEO and the COO, and maybe they sit at your table at dinner. Incredible food. And it's not just about the CEO and the COO or the presidents. All the GMs show up. It's educational, summaries at the end that are consistent across all of the slides, getting customers up there that you can ask uncomfortable questions to if you want. So first of all, hats off on a great event. This was not about news, right? This wasn't about the big news. And Dan, you and I follow the company so closely, we understand where they've come from. I think this was more getting all the analysts up to speed, but also putting out some, hey, here's kind of what we're looking at. So I see strength in the custom ASIC market in a lot of areas like smart NICs, cloud partnerships on AI accelerators. And they said it without saying. In fact, they put up some slides that clearly indicated they have design wins, but they also have designs in manufacturing. And that was a huge deal. We saw also, we had their CTO got up on stage and talked about the future of AI and high performance computing and the value add that Marvell Technologies could bring to the table, particularly related to CXL and moving data across accelerators, but also the required memory footprint that it takes to pull off these applications in the most successful way possible. I was very impressed with the way that they showed just how far they are ahead in working with TSMC on 3 and 5 nanometer. They literally are the vehicle for big semis, and that's not including Apple or Qualcomm on this. And you know, what do you get when you're first to market with a new node? Well, you get typically lower cost per transistor, even though it does cost a boatload to get out there first. And also by having a smaller wafer, or a wafer you can pack, you know, 30% more transistors in the same size, you get higher capability. So higher capability and lower cost and lower power are not bad things in semiconductors the last time that I checked.
Oh, no, they're not a bad thing at all. And Pat, you called out a lot of things that I think are really great. You know, over the last year, we've both been on the record. We're not Marvell fanboys, but you can't argue with some of the data. You know, first of all, I just want to give a shout. You kind of talked about the food, and I think it's worth pointing out, when you're going to lock us in a room for 12 hours and pound data across the screen, make it good. And I think Marvell did a really nice job of that. Quick action-packed sort of TED Talk style interactions with more than a dozen of their executive VPs and senior execs, and also customers, which I thought was great. We saw customers, we saw partners, which I always like to see, you know, that it's not just about them tooting their own horn, but actually hearing customers like Nokia and others that showed up there and actually told stories about why they're partnering so closely with Marvell. The second thing, you know, the dinner was great. I mean, the CEO, Matt Murphy, did come home from, you know, being with Joe Biden earlier that morning to hang out with us. And so we really did appreciate that. And Matt's been really gracious, and he's always been gracious with his time. And, you know, he's one of our keynotes here on the 6.5 Summit last year. Hopefully he'll be back next year. You know, Chris Koopmans came on stage, and I just want to do a little macro dive real quickly. You know, I've been thematically and almost obsessively talking publicly on the record and on TV about how important it is for companies to be at lower exposure to consumer if they want to be able to wade through this next couple of years of market volatility. Well, he came up with a slide that basically showed their 2017 versus their 2022 performance, and then how their revenue is transformed from what it was to what it is. In 17, Pat, 62% of Marvell's revenue was consumer. You remember what it is today?
Yeah, like 12.
God, you're good. It's actually 12%. This is why Pat's number one, everybody. Today, they're 88% infrastructure, 12% consumer. That move by Matt, Chris, and the team was, no bones about it, the most important move that was made that has made the company so successful over this last period of time. And while the stock has cut in half from where it was at its high, the company's actually doubled its revenue in just the past 2 years. It was $3 billion in revenue in FY21, and its annualized revenue for its fiscal year 2023, they expect $6 billion. I mean, so that's just a reflection on how crazy the market is. Double your revenue, make your company more resilient, and then get your stock price halved. So thanks, Jerome Powell, and terrible policy made by our Congress over the last few years. Joke, kind of. No, you have to interpret. You listen to my history. You'll see where I stand on all this stuff. And Pat, the other thing is just really strong performance across all the categories. The company has really categorized and been very transparent. I remember the first time I was reviewing its earnings, it kind of had like these two categories, and it was very kind of hard to read through. And now they've broken it into 4 very clear categories, and they're reporting the revenue on it, which I love that kind of transparency. Data center, carrier, automotive, enterprise networking. All of them, Pat, in 2 years period of time are close to or more than doubling. Data center up 2.4 times, automotive 2.9 times, enterprise networking 2.1. Carrier is the only one that hasn't doubled at 1.8. But performance across the portfolio, hard to be upset about that. There's a reason that Matt and Chris were smiling at dinner, and there was a reason we were smiling. They were smiling because of this. We were smiling because dinner was delicious. Good day at Marvell.
Wow, man. You just crushed that. You
Thanks,
really
buddy.
did.
Thanks.
But let's move to the next one. Let's see if Dan can crush FTC filing suit against Microsoft about its Activision deal.
All right, Pat. Well, let's do a little bit more of a story and a little bit less news here. We do say that we're less news, right? And we're more analysis. So over the last few years, there's been a bit of a market narrative that Microsoft is somehow able to always escape scrutiny when it comes to antitrust. Well, never more. The company has, made this deal, and I want to be transparent about my position. I came out early when this deal was announced, and I said I think it will go through. I was about 95% positive on it. After the FTC block, I'm now sitting at more like 70% positive. Now, to some extent, I think the FTC is responding to this sort of broad criticism that it has received for not actually challenging Microsoft. And part of the reason it hasn't challenged Microsoft has had to do with the fact that a lot of Microsoft's deals are enterprise focused, and enterprise just doesn't get above the radar nearly as much as consumer stuff does. So if it's impacting, consumers directly, the FTC tends to take a bigger stance than when things are, more of a business to business solution, which is still the largest part of the Microsoft portfolio. But why does there's a lot of gaming companies, and by the way, there's a lot of options for how people game. And so why would the FTC really take note of this? On the console side, you've got Microsoft, you've got Sony, you've got Nintendo. But of course, console gaming is only a part of the business. You got console gaming, you got PC and desktop gaming, and then of course you have mobile gaming. So people have a lot of choice. It's not like one of these situations where you have two choices. However, Microsoft, is in a situation where if they start to control a lot of the content, that can become a problem beyond the console. It starts to become a problem on the desktop. It starts to become a problem on the mobile devices. And I think a lot of the worry here is with Activision being, one of the big game slayers, that has some of the biggest titles, is that Microsoft could use this to sort of control some of the pricing of or availability that they do. So games like Call of Duty, which are now available on any console, and there's different versions of the gaming available on mobile and on PC, they could suddenly say, well, it's only available on this, or they give pricing advantages or feature advantages that might go to certain users that are using Microsoft hardware or Microsoft gaming services, and they wouldn't pass those on to the rest of their community. There's already been some concern, I believe, due to past acquisitions. And Pat, I don't remember which game it was, but there was a game where they basically told Europe that this wouldn't be an issue, and now they're starting to have some exclusive titles. So there was a little bit of this, did they go back on their word? And I'm going to try to find which one that was. I was reading about it yesterday. Overall, though, Pat, here's what my kind of takeaway on it is. Of all the things that our FTC needs to be focused on, this to me does not. You remember when Chamath said on the All In Pod, this is below my line, and he was talking about something actually really important? This is not that important. Of all the things, you look at the App Store on Apple and you say, we're not regulating that, but we're worried about how a gaming company might use competitive content that they own to create monopolies. And I just say, is this a wag the dog moment? Is this really the most important thing that our FTC could be using to litigate, is whether or not Activision and Call of Duty is unfairly being distributed to Microsoft gamers versus people who use Sony? I don't know, Pat. Long story short, the gaming industry is huge. People have tons of choices. There's tons of titles. If you don't want to play Call of Duty, there's other shooter games that you can play on other consoles. It seems to me like this is a little bit of a, hey, let's do something to Microsoft to make everyone happy. And meanwhile, Tim Apple is going to just continue to charge 30% and make everybody's life miserable that doesn't want to use the Apple Store. So sorry, I know I'm diatribe, but off I go.
So everybody knew it was going to be trouble when Lena Khan came in to head up the FTC. She's pretty active on Twitter, and she's been pretty active in her beliefs. So we knew what would happen when we came in. Now, when she first came in, there was some instant scrutiny on even past deals. For instance, between Instagram and Facebook, right? And then that went to scrutiny of now Meta trying to buy an MR or an XR company. And so that people kind of knew, okay, it was kind of a bigger company buying a smaller company. Make no mistake, Activision and Microsoft are very much large companies out there. Activision is not a startup. In fact, if you go back and look at the titles, I mean, it's over 30 years old. So we're not talking about you're talking about a bigger company buying a big company, not a huge company buying a small company. That's different. And what also continued across the Obama administration was also this view of not what the numbers are today, but what could happen in the future. And that's a big challenge. I mean, heck, we saw that in the Qualcomm lawsuits, which it's not about consumer harm. It's not about what they did, right? Because the lawsuit was about 4G, right? And but somehow it was, here's what Qualcomm could do on 5G. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed, and IP protection was in the end decided upon. So, Microsoft already has come out and said, for Sony, hey, I'm going to make certain titles available for a decade, right? I think it was Call of Duty that they said. And I don't think this is an indication that the deal gets killed. I think this is an indication that there will be some official ring fencing on how the company operates and goes forward. Microsoft is digging in on this one, and they're not just going to go away. I do think it's ironic that Microsoft and its employees actively help the administration that is about to block this. But hey, that's more of an editorial than anything else. There are implications, folks, on the people that you give money to as employees and companies to get into office, and you are looking at one of these right now. Dan, let's get into, did you want to do a follow-up on that one?
No, I actually just thought that was great analysis. They're going to dig in. And to your point, though, I think everybody out there, this isn't over. This is not over. I still weigh at 70-30 it gets done. What's your weight? Give me a guess.
I'm probably at 75-25.
All right. So we're both kind of in the camp, though, that they're going to fight through this, and it's still going to happen, which means there's a lot of arbitrage out there for people that have some gall, although it's not advice. Just want to make that clear.
Exactly. Speaking of not advice, let's dive into Broadcom earnings. Dan, man, this company is just an absolute machine in the amount of goodness that it brings to the table in terms of earnings. I mean, they pretty much knocked it out of the park. I'm stalling to find my notes here.
Yeah, no, it's why, Pat.
No, listen, they met on top line, and I don't know why some publications said that they beat it. I mean, it was 8.93 on an 8.9 expectation, but they beat on profits, 10.45 versus 10.29. Dan, they paid a $4.60 dividend. Okay, think about that. And then they did a much
like 800 a share.
They did a better than expected Q1. I am unaware of anybody, but I think maybe Lattice that did a heavy duty guide into the future. Now, The company is 79% semiconductors and 21% in software across CA, Brocade, and their security offerings. Semiconductors, I mean, grew an astonishing 26%. And, you know, we've seen Intel, we've seen AMD, we've seen just a multitude of companies come out there. And that's astonishing growth. And why is that? Well, first of all, they are a supplier to Apple in terms of RF and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And they, even though that might be a little bit at risk given the chaos in Apple's factories in North China, but it's because they're heavy duty into hyperscalers and data centers. And it appears, and we saw this with HPE, we saw this with Dell, and we're seeing this with IBM, the enterprise continues to load up. And that's more than just, for some, it's clearing out the backlogs. For others, there's going to be continued demand. So for instance, with HPE, right, Antonio talked about, yeah, we cleared a lot of backlog, but guess what? Our size of our backlog is basically the same, right? And that just means there's net new orders that are coming in. And it appears, because the company did point out hyperscalers, that the hyperscalers are in another consuming mode, right? What they do is they buy for about 3 quarters and they trail it off for 2. And you're asking, well, why is that? All the SaaS stuff is going down. Well, guess what? They're also the backbone for all consumer services. And while the consumer hardware market is in the toilet, I don't see any lack of demand in consumer services online, whether it be, you know, Gmail for consumers, any flavor of TikTok that's out there. That's all riding on the back in a giant data center. VMware deal looks like it's on track without any expected surprises. You know, and I think Broadcom CEO Hock Tan is doing an exceptional job communicating to the customers, the channel, and the ecosystem partners. You know, Hock hasn't communicated a lot historically, and you can be a lot more insular when you're just doing semiconductors. But customers brought up issues, and he's been on planes, trains, and automobiles.
To Austin, right?
He did. He came to Austin, and we had a nice breakfast together and had a wonderful discussion. He's a very direct guy. He's very honest. I love the conversation. So I think that they could have done a little bit earlier, but hats off to them for really stepping it up. I don't think there is a week that goes that there's not a blog from Hock Tan.
Or you about Hock Tan. Have you checked out Pat's Forbes column? Because if you haven't, you should. He's had some really good insights there. You know, it's our job sometimes to take a position, and the popular sentiment among industry analysts has been kind of one-sided on this particular topic. And I know we're talking about earnings, but I just want to be very specific. When it comes to the VMware deal, the industry side has been incredibly jaded about the potential that Broadcom has. I think you and I are outsiders a little bit, but we see it differently. And we see the fact that, there's been some real success with CA. There's been some growth in Symantec. You've got a business that knows how to operate, knows how to be efficient, knows how to put off cash. I tweeted after the earnings came out yesterday. I said, part of the reason I feel optimistic about VMware is this is a company that knows how to perform in any market, meaning good market, bad market. It knows how to perform. Is he shrewd in his business decisions? Yes. Are most great companies run by people that are pretty shrewd in their business decisions? Yes. Is a business's purpose to be profitable? Yes. If your business isn't designed to make a profit, then you're doing something wrong. And if your business doesn't figure out how to run better during different economic cycles, then you're not leading the company the way you should. These are things that Hock is very good at. And this, by the way, is why the investor community love Hock Tan and love Broadcom. On the industry side, though, we tend to be a little more ephemeral about things. It's a little more about the touchy-feely. Well, to his credit, the touchy-feely here has been the most touchy-feely I've ever seen from Hawk in terms of, let me tell you what I'm thinking about. Let me tell you about what we're doing about pricing. Let me tell you what we're going to do about innovation. So I guess while you're certainly entitled out there to your opinion that the company is going to run VMware into the ground or is going to screw up the market for it, I would actually argue VMware was already kind of in a bit of a stagnant path, and it actually has a chance right now to use this moment as an opportunity to reverse course, regain momentum, and really take advantage of this multi-cloud era. Now, again, is it different than the company's current DNA? Sure. Does it mean that does it mean a company can't change? No. And I think that's what you and I are both really saying, is that it seems to us, based upon the what we're hearing from CEO Hock Tan, what we're hearing from the leaders of their software groups that we work with, like Greg Lotko and Mainframe, who have been there, who's been other places, who love the company, by the way, that this is moving in the right direction. So I say, keep your eyes on this company. But while that deal is being closed, clearly the growth in infrastructure, the demand for enterprise is very robust. The only thing that maybe left a question mark was they didn't give full year guidance due to some lacking visibility, something they typically do. Going forward, I think they will. All right, onward, Patrick. Broadcom, good quarter. Wow, that was a lot, buddy. I didn't think I had anything to add there.
Well, you certainly did, buddy. You made up for it.
Thanks. Thanks. Should we boomerang? You want to boomerang?
I don't. I thought that was a good thing. Listen, I wasn't positive on the deal. I mean, Hock Tan literally said publicly and wrote he's not going to raise prices. So we can all stop whining about that. And I was a chief whiner on that. So,
by the way, I just want to say this to everybody out there. Hello, beautiful. All right.
So nice. Hey, let's move to the final topic. Slack founder Stuart Butterfield leaving Salesforce on the heels of Bret Taylor leaving. What's going on, Dan?
What is going on at Salesforce? Just a week ago, I went on CNBC, talked a little bit about that earnings and the big Bret Taylor news, and you go, wow, what an inflection for the company. This is a company in transition. Guess what? I really do have the feeling that what is happening is, with the stock down second most out of any Dow component this year besides Intel, I think Mark Benioff is back. I think he's back. He's showing us face. He's not happy with the product, the innovation, the development. He's basically handed the keys to a few people. He made a $27 billion investment in Slack. And I'm on the record by saying for a long time, I think the Slack Salesforce portfolio has some massive potential. But Pat, do you think its potential has been reached just yet?
Oh my gosh, absolutely not. I mean,
no. And I'm going to let you fill in your gaff, but no, right? I mean, it is just not even close. And Microsoft Teams is literally in Salesforce's cafeteria on the daily having lunch on that potential. Now, what could Slack and Salesforce be together? It could absolutely be the most legitimate competitor in the market to that full suite of productivity, of collaboration, of automation and platform for low code and no code. And of course, developing, future of work, what Mark Benioff coined as the digital headquarters. Well, it hasn't happened yet. So you have Bret, who's been really focused on the Twitter deal. And, it's hard to be the chairman of the board of a deal that's going on with Elon Musk that's taken up every headline. But unfortunately, when you are the CEO of the world's largest and one of the most exciting SaaS companies on the planet, you got to do that job before you can be a board member. Now, again, I know Mark Benioff went on air. He was very emotional, and I think those were real emotions. I think he really did want to see Bret succeed. I think he really wanted to see Keith Block succeed. I think he also really wanted to see Stuart Butterfield with Slack really help bring it forward. But for whatever reason, the parts and pieces that have been put into that organization just have not quite created this ripe environment for innovation across all these acquisitions. Now, we were critical early on about the inorganic spend. Look, I like inorganic acquisitions and growth. I think inorganic is critical once you hit a certain point in a company, but it doesn't work if you don't integrate these inorganic things in a situation where integration is the whole purpose. This isn't a roll-up. This isn't a house of brands. This is a platform. This is an ecosystem where Salesforce needs all of its tools and technologies to be unified. And by the way, not everything in Microsoft works together, but the story does. the story right now is very compelling across portfolio, and every day they're building toward that. The story at Salesforce still leaves a lot of, will Slack and Salesforce and Marketing Cloud and Service Cloud and automation and bots and all this stuff ever really truly work together where someone's going to come into work, open up Salesforce, and that's going to be their working ecosystem? And I think that the answer to that is not yet. So Stuart's leaving, new CEO in, Lian. She seems very compelling. We sat on that call this week. We listened to them speak. It was a very eloquently delivered transition, just like the one with Brett. But don't mistake, there is some uncertainty going on at Salesforce. I think these new leaders, and I think with Mark back, look, Mark will always be the heart of Salesforce. Mark is Larry. Mark is to Salesforce what Larry Ellison is to Oracle. And when things get tough, Mark is going to be the guy that's going to come back probably one or two more times over the next couple of decades. He'll be 115 years old, and he's going to come back and work. And when they need a new innovation, they need a new disruption, Mark will be their path. But not the end of the world. I think they're going to push through this.
It is a house of the full stack platform. And there are some companies who've had that full stack for a long time, like Microsoft and Google. And there are companies who are actively building it, like Salesforce, trying to do it between a combination of inorganic and organic. Then you have even companies like Zoom trying to do it organically. It was going to happen through 5.9, but that didn't happen because the stock cratered, and they had to back out. Now they're building everything. And with building stacks, you have to, like you inferred, you need to show incremental value to your customers that it matters. And to do that, there's the technical side. There's the really honing in on the core value proposition of what that means. And then it means marketing and then getting your sellers to engage to make that happen. And I think, again, I have nobody inside that told me any of this, but what's your natural reaction if you're founder Benioff, right? You're going to raise the heat, and there were some people who could have just said, "Listen, I'm not up for that right now." And I think even separating my intuition and connecting that to Stuart Butterfield and the conversation that you and I both had live with him. I mean, he said, "I'm tired. I'm 50. I have a new baby." Listen, I appreciate the honesty. I get that. Okay. I'm older than Stuart. I get what it's like.
Do you believe that, Pat?
I believe that.
Okay.
And by the way, I think it connects perfectly with your thesis of turning up the heat. And I got to tell you, though, I appreciate him bearing his soul. With that, though, the show must go on, and Lydiana Jones is coming in. I appreciated the kind words. I mean, I'm old enough to cut through the BS of executive happy talk and reality. And Lydiana really appreciates Stuart. And I think that's important, right? Because when your executives trust each other or like each other at a certain point, things are just smoother in how they act. Based on what they said, I have confidence in the future of the integration. I got a better idea of just how hard the integration has been when you put a chat modality inside of multiple products in multiple countries and the impact to the data. I can't, Lydiana's words, check out the link I put in the show notes to Lydiana's public things that she talked about, and see for yourself. And in the end, actions speak louder than words, and results speak more than actions. And we'll see what the company can do. And it is amazing. Sometimes the grand purifier, Daniel, one of those can be a recession. And when you're a Salesforce and you're hitting your numbers, you're 25% growth every quarter for a year on end, and that comes to a temporary end, you have to take action and you do have to turn up the heat. So if Benioff truly is turning up the heat, I can't see that that's a bad thing.
Yeah, no, Pat, you make a great point, and it's exactly like what we've said about some of these layoffs. These companies kind of just, we're growing. We got a lot of staff. We got some extra costs, but we're growing. And the tunnel vision gets real. And all I'm saying, all of a sudden, when the stuff hits the fan, that lens opens up, and you're like, "Holy crud! How did we get so over staffed, and how do we get our expenses running through the roof?" Well, as long as you're growing, covers revenue. What do we always say, Pat? Revenue covers a lot of problems for companies. So this is an inflection point. But yeah, good analysis, Pat.
Great episode. It was fun. We talked Lattice, Marvell, MongoDB, Broadcom, Slack, Microsoft, Activision. I do like these more balanced ones. I like a little bit of earnings, but I don't like earnings. I enjoy earnings palooza less than I do. And we got a nice combination here of SaaS, antitrust, chips, and core databases here. And I like when they were balanced like that. Daniel, what do you think?
I do too, Pat. I'd actually like to add some shows in the future, do some shows where we talk about things like this Activision deal, go more in depth into some of these controversial stories like the Apple China news, because I think people need that. I think the media tends to be a little too, to have too much of a side on these, doesn't necessarily always understand everything that's happening. And we tend to have the insights to know what these things mean. And so I don't know if we'll ever get to that. Maybe someday. We're not a little bit busy, but I really enjoy kind of, diving into some of these complex topics.
I do too. And, the sad part most of the time is the press don't have more than a couple hours to crank something out. And now they're feature stories, right? The 4,000 word ones that they get a month to do, but they don't have a lot of time to dig in. So I think it'd be fun. Let's consider it, and maybe even consider a specific earnings show where we could, it's literally all about earnings, and we can put charts up. We can talk, talk turkey like that. Maybe
we'll get our producers on it, Pat. We'll get our producers on it, and we'll get our bookers to help us with our calendars, because the time is the enemy. But
it is.
It's Friday, buddy. It's a great Friday.
It is funny though how much we would dive in once we like something, right?
Head first, buddy, into the empty pool.
This is Pat Moorhead signing off with Daniel Newman from Futurum Research for another 6-5. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you liked it. If not, well, you know where you can go. No, seriously, if you have any input, Daniel and I, you know where to find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We spend way too much time out there. Have a good morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are on the planet. Take care. We appreciate you, and we will see you next week.